Speaking of horrible people, right after the Bernie Sanders Fox Town Hall, they Martha McCallum
went home and cried.
No, she didn't. Oh. She tried to stop her crying by bringing on Arthur Laffer, Arthur Laffer was the genius behind the whole idea of trickle-down economics, where it's like if we concentrate all of the tax benefits and the wealth at the top, it will shower down upon us, right? Like the clouds, the clouds get so thick with moisture that they rain. So in this
rain.
Yeah, it would be like a shower, all the shower of gold. You'd get this golden shower on everyone from all the money being concentrated at the top. And Arthur Laffer had this theory, and he had this thing called the Laffer curve, which he wrote on the side of a napkin, so it's true. And it suggested that there is a tax rate in which everybody would decide, like, oh, it's not worth it for me to earn another dollar, so I'm going to stop working. Now, of course, that in some way ignores the concept of marginal tax rates, because we don't all have the ability to say, like, oh, I'm going to make sure that my income comes in at $2.9 million as opposed to like $3.1 million, because every dollar after $3 million will be taxed at a 70% rate, let's say. And so I'm going to just land at 2.9 because my return, every dollar I'm only getting 30 cents on the dollar over 3 million. Well, most people don't have the ability to sort of land their income in that fashion. If you're in the neighborhood of getting $3 million, it's quite possible you might get $3.3 million by mistake. But this theory that Laffer had promoted the idea that we should cut taxes on the wealthiest people, because that's going to create economic growth. And so who better to go to than to Arthur Laffer to talk about Bernie Sanders' plans to tax people for health care, and in fact, to talk about Bernie Sanders' tax returns.
It's an interesting thing that you bring up with regard to charity. And of course, every American can give or not give. It's their, it's their right to do.
Now, so they're looking at Bernie Sanders' taxes, and apparently in some years he gave virtually nothing to charity. Some years, just a couple of percentage points, but no tithing like you would, is called for by the Lord.
Whatever they want in charity, so I don't begrudge him. I think it was 3%, 3.6% maybe, Art. But the whole basis of what he's talking about is that we all should want to give back more to even out the income inequality in this country.
Well, he doesn't say we should want to. He says we will be forced to if he gets in. That's what he's going to do to the tax codes. And what he doesn't talk about, Martha, which is really serious here, if I may, what he doesn't talk about is how those taxes, when he's putting them on, will affect the economy. Whenever you do redistribution, and his whole thing was energy, was environment, was health care, was education, all of that. Whenever you redistribute income, you take from those who make a little bit more and you give to those who make a little bit less. By taking from those who make a little bit more, you reduce their incentives and they work a little bit less and produce a little bit less. By giving to those who have a little bit less, you provide them with an alternative source of income other than working, and they too will produce a little bit less. Now, this is math. It's not right-wing, left-wing, Republican, Democrat.
Pause. Now, do you understand here what okay, put aside the fact that they don't seem to understand the difference between charity and taxation, and that they're like, but what the kind of giving he wants to give would be mandated by the government. Yeah, that's called taxation. Arthur Laffer would have you believe, you ready for this, that if you're rich and you get taxed more, you're going to work less. In other words, if you get to have less money when you work, you're going to work less. But if you get to have more money, if you're, as you say, you have a little bit less. If you get more money, you're also going to work less. Isn't that convenient? That both, if you're rich and you don't make as much money because you get taxed more, you're going to work less. And if you're not rich and you get a little more money, you're going to work less.
This is like the Iraq invasion intelligence of economics.
And now that's one way. You could just use reason to say that that's not true. And he just says it's just math. It's just math. Aside from the fact that there's absolutely no evidence, zero evidence, even anecdotally, of someone who said, you know what, my marginal tax rate was, let's say, 50%. 50% of every dollar over the first 10 million I make. And so, you know what, I hung back a little bit. I just decided to land it. I'm going to work so that I make $9.5 million every year, because when you get over 10 million, if I'm only making 50 cents on the dollar, forget it. Why am I putting in that extra 11 minutes a week or whatever it was that supposedly this person's going to work less?
Or paying people to work for you, which is how a lot of the wealthy make their money.
Of course. Of course. So not only is there no evidence for that assertion, and there's no evidence for the assertion that if we provide free childcare, free daycare, pre-K, higher education, if we provide health care with the raising of taxes, that people are going to work less. No evidence for that whatsoever either. There's a lot of evidence that Arthur Laffer doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. So we all remember Kansas, right? Kansas is a state in this country.
I'm familiar.
And in 2012, Governor Sam Brownback was elected, and maybe it was elected in 2010? I can't remember. But by 2012, they had passed a massive tax cut bill that was drawn up by Arthur Laffer. And the whole idea was very similar to the one that Donald Trump passed. If you're an S Corp, you get huge tax breaks, and we're going to eliminate the income tax for S Corps and all sorts of tax cuts. And what was going to happen, according to Arthur Laffer, right, is that it was going to spur economic growth. And it was actually, the idea is this, is that when you cut taxes, you're actually going to increase revenue, because it's going to spur so much economic growth that more people are going to get involved and more people are going to pay taxes. So the amount of taxes is going to be less, but the amount of people that are going to be paying that smaller amount is going to be so great that it's actually going to increase how much revenue you're taking in. Here is a graphic of Sam Brownback's vanishing surplus. It goes from 2013 at its peak, $700 million, down by 2015 to $30 million. And let's see the next slide. They had to cut everything. The S&P downgraded their credit rating because of Sam Brownback's tax cuts, which caused massive cuts to education, It slowed job growth relative to all the states around Kansas. It slowed economic growth relative to all the states around Kansas, including the country, but more importantly, around Kansas. So it wasn't just a regional thing. Look at this. Sam Brownback's tax cuts, now full-blown disaster for Kansans. Kansas tax cut experiment crashes and burns. By 2016, the Republican legislature in Kansas had raised taxes. So Arthur Laffer is sitting there telling us all about what is math. Play this a little bit more. Listen to this. What do you
will
call
produce
it?
a little bit less. Now this is math. It's not right wing, left wing, Republican, Democrat. It's not liberal or conservative. It's just plain economics. Whenever you redistribute income, you reduce total income, and that is what he's doing. And I am very afraid that if he were elected, we would have an enormous crash in the market. Now, that crash would come in anticipation of his election, but it's much like Obama, who I believe was the reason why we had the Great Recession. As he got closer and closer to winning, the markets collapsed.
Wow.
This is like psychic economics.
Yeah, I was going to say, if that's basic economics, I'm starting to think economics might be bullshit.
Let me tell you something.
He's not a pederast. He's pedantic. He's a little bit pedantic.
Pedantic.
Yes,
I was
pederast.
wondering
Not
what word you were
Not
looking
right,
for
not
there.
right.
Definitely pedantic.
Pedantic.
Not the
Right,
other one.
No,
Strike
exactly.
that, yeah.
Yes,
strike that.
strike
Correction.
that.
I apologize.
Absolutely struck from the. There was a reason why I gave you a very weird,
Right.
meaningful look.
Well, I think it. But the idea that there was a stock market
you
crash,
get something wrong?
stock market crash because people anticipated Barack Obama's election. This is something that, honestly, if you were to say this in public, like if it wasn't Martha McCallum there and he was on another network, there would be people with white coats to say, like, Arthur, maybe it's time for you to take a little break. I think you're a little tired. But this is how they're going to try and explain away any type of recession that hits with Donald Trump.
I think that the economic
They're
recovery,
aware that Bernie Sanders might win the election,
Well,
so they're
look,
all.
I took a couple of economics classes, and I think that the economy recovered because of the stimulus and also in anticipation that Bernie would be elected in 2020.
There was people
I
that
think
had
there
that
were
type of
early
vision.
signals that there would be a serious plan for the working and middle classes that would emerge in 2020, which is why the economy actually started to recover in 2009 and 2010.
Maybe.
Well, that's what I think. That's my
Well,
very strong sense.
It's not like trickle-down economics has been tried already or given a fair hearing, so maybe we should give it a chance.
Right. Well, we should maybe. Well, I mean, I think to a certain extent we have with the Republican tax cut, and it has done nothing. I mean, it is J.P. Morgan $3.6 billion worth of extra cash this year, which I guess that should help the real estate market on in the Hamptons. But that's about it.